Today on Mental Health News Radio, Kristin Walker is joined by Dr. Kristina Hallett. Dr. Hallett is a psychologist, professor, executive coach, and international speaker. She's also the host of the Be Awesome podcast on Mental Health News Radio Network. You don't want to miss this conversation. Stay tuned.
I wanna try and take in all the highs, embrace them for more than a moment's time. I want you, please don't move when I push you away. I know I contradict myself some days, but will you ride the lows with me?
Welcome to Mental Health News Radio. I am your host, Kristin Walker. Our goal is to help discussions about mental health be a regular part of your daily life, no different than discussions about physical health. Mental illness can be a topic of discussion under the umbrella of mental health, along with so many other topics. This show is the original program on mentalhealthnewsradionetwork.com. Our network of shows are played in over 180 countries and cover more topics under that umbrella than you can possibly imagine. We were talking about mental health long before it became cool and popular to talk about, and thank goodness it has become so popular. We have incredible guests, advocates, patients, experts, people. Thank you for tuning in and enjoy our intro music, a song named Lows, written by Aubrey Toon. You can find her music at www.aubreytoone.com.
That night when I started praying, I cried. Will you ride the lows with me? Will you ride the lows with me? When I'm down, my vision gets blurry.
Hey, listeners. So I'm taking my editor's advice in doing some shows recently because I definitely have struggled with a passion for doing anything other than sleep and eat and not read the news like a crazed lunatic, checking it every 20 minutes lately after everything went through last year. And one of the things Joe said to me was, why don't you just have people that you feel comfortable with, safe with? Those are your best shows anyway, people that you know. So hence, welcome, Dr. Kristina Hallett.
I can't help but laugh. We always laugh anyway.
Yeah.
I so understand that. I get it. And there's just been so much that we've had to shift and accommodate to in the last year. Like, to try to break it down, I was actually literally trying to do that last night with my husband. And I'm like, wow, there's just been a lot. There is a lot. I know I've come up with new passions and some things I've had to table, and then I'm trying to get back in. So I hear you, sister.
Yeah, I was on a show with lovely people, not my show, a different show. And it was a conversation that I would have been all into maybe in January of last year. And I had to mute myself, and I'm not throwing a pity party. This is just what happened. I had to mute myself and let them talk because I was just weeping. I could not stop weeping. And I felt so alone. I didn't feel lonely. I just felt extremely alone, and not in a sad way. It just made me go, I don't care about this conversation. I don't care about what they're talking about at all. And I just feel really alone in that. Hence also asking you to come on my show.
Right. Well, that alone feeling, right, that is such a big deal, because it doesn't mean I have no connections or anything else.
Right.
It's that sense of, wow, does anybody get me? Like, does anyone care about what I care and not care about the things I don't really care about? Like, not that we have to be carbon copies, but like, who's on my wavelength? Where are my people?
And what is my wavelength? Like, I've been thinking that too, because, we're passionate people. So you can't work at something, and neither can I, that we aren't passionate about. So, but my passions have so changed that I feel like I'm brand new at doing the same things that I did last year and, pre-pandemic, but I'm like, it's like I'm doing them for the first time and having to figure out how to make them work with this new me.
That's a really good point. I hadn't thought about it just that way, but I want to give you an example, if I may, of a way in which my passions have come together. So I'm all passionate about mental health and wellness, as are you, right?
Yeah.
And this past year, something that I've always been passionate about are issues of equity and systemic racism and how we treat people and the true inclusivity. And the things that have gone on this year have just it was already present in my life, but I've worked, and I can tell you about it later, but worked to bring that directly to my community, which I always did that stuff outside of my community. And then this year have held myself accountable to also doing this where I live. But where this has come together is specifically this concept that right now is just on my mind all the time, which is racial trauma. And that racial trauma is a real mental health issue.
Absolutely.
Right.
I'm not laughing at that. It's just, I mean, and it seems so obvious, and yet it has not been obvious to the mainstream really forever. It's been obvious to certain groups of people, but it certainly has not been obvious to the mainstream. So I laugh because, hello.
Right.
Of course it is.
It's not that we didn't know, but because one of the things in my town that I'm really working on is to try to get my town to adopt recognition that racism is a public health crisis.
Yeah.
But the more I thought about it, I'm like, when people say public health, we're primarily still talking about physical health. And I'm like, hello, mental health. So I have to tell you, I'm going to describe to you the sweatshirt that I'm wearing today, which, yay, made myself. Well, not the sweatshirt. I mean, I don't sew, but I decorated it. So on the top, it says, racial trauma is real. Then there's a big lime green circle in the middle that says, in letters on top of it, Black Lives Matter every day. And on the bottom, it says, racism is a public mental health crisis.
Yeah, one of the things when I asked Joe, who also edits your shows, I said, what's up with Kristina? He said, well, she's really talking a lot about racism. And I said, good. Because one of the things I think about with this network is, and one of the things I love about it is, I can't talk about everything and do that well, So, and I used to think I had to do that. And then I was like, oh God, thank God, people smarter than me about that topic or more passionate or whatever it is. Yay. So when he told me that, I felt this huge amount of relief.
Yeah, I am at this place specifically where I can't not talk about it. Like I must.
Yep.
And as I said, that's been true for me for years, but very specifically in my town in a way which, not a super secret reveal. I'm actually going to be running for a town office this fall.
Good for you. Oh my God. Yeah. I wish I could get an address there just so I could vote for you. Oh my God.
But and so we are, and for listeners, there's no way you would know this. So I'll just tell you, I'm in Connecticut and we're a small population, I think 14,000-ish people in a 40 square mile town. So small, right near the border of Massachusetts. So we're very New England-y. And our population is just below 90% white, and the rest people of color. And politically, our town breaks down almost into thirds. It's sort of a third who will say they're Democrats, a third who are Republicans, and another third who are independents, many of whom lead Republican. lean Republican. But I'm not saying this is about political party affiliation. What I am saying, although there's some intersections there, but what I'm saying is that because of the nature of this town, and a lot of people, not me, grew up here and stayed here. So there's people with unbelievable amounts of years and connections to this town. And it's a nice town. I mean, right? Like from the surface, you'd be like, wow, it's really nice. Except we know that systemic racism is everywhere. We know that we all also have internalized racism. That's just what it means to grow up in the US. And so as we've been raising issues in town, there's been so much pushback, right? People are like, no, that's not here, not in Suffield. I'm like, of course it is.
God, please.
Right. And I'm not saying anyone's bad. Like there's that whole, oh, you're calling me a mean name. I'm like, no, I'm saying this is real. And if we can just get out of our own ego and see that and say that, we can actually address some of the really not at all okay, highly problematic things that do happen in our town, right? And everywhere else. So yeah, it's so I've had this, it's just funny because I still do I still talk about stress and resilience, and it's this whole other dimension that I'm like, wow, it's all well and good to be over in the UK talking about this, but I have a responsibility to do it where I live too.
Yeah. And I mean, this is how people get into policy and politics and all those things. You develop this passion for it. And thank God, I mean, I could never run for anything because they could dig up all kinds of horrible stuff and that would be the end of that. But,
no, let's be clear. It's not like I'm like, woohoo, I am so awesome. And
I know.
Everybody's going to vote for me.
That's not you anyway, but yeah.
It like the thought makes me want to vomit, which we remember when our first conversation. I know if I feel like I want to vomit, I have to do it because it's part of my growth.
Yeah. And you have to have people passionate about what they're passionate about in order to, foster change. I mean, it makes me sick too. I've experienced it with family members that were not white and watched how they were treated and the way that they tried to mold themselves into a very white, family. And just, you witness these things at the different places that people do. And it's just always fascinating to me to watch how those things play out on a bigger, stage outside your family, out in the world. And certainly all of it has come to a big, it's not a screeching halt because we'll always have, issues with racism, but it's certainly a new wave of vocalism around it.
Yeah. And, we opened with COVID, but huge part because of COVID, because we were home.
Yep.
And we were seeing things and we couldn't just close our eyes.
Well, the political landscape was, fevered on with white supremacy hanging on, to every last possible shred of power and trying to overtake everything. And thank God it didn't totally win, but boy, what already existed is not hidden under a rock anymore.
No, not at all. Right. And, I have obviously mixed feelings about that. Like you knew it, and at least now you can see it, but which I think is our responsibility. But man, oh man, I confess I used to be hopeful that it wasn't quite as prevalent as it is. And I'm like, wow.
I know.
Just stick your head back in the sand, Kristina, like you're clueless.
I know it's interesting, the white people that absolutely freely say, absolutely, there's racism within me. Of course, my God. I mean, what an obtuse person I would be if I didn't acknowledge that, even though in other circles, people go, you're not a racist. If you can't admit that you have it in you, then you needs to get some therapy.
Get therapy, read some books, like come on, people.
Just I was telling you about, I for whatever reason, I'm still figuring it out. I moved to this little teensy weensy place that the owner bills itself as a community of like-minded people. And I'm like, oh, no,
Not my mind.
that's not my mind. And I mean, there's a QAnon freaking person here and a bunch of Trumpers. Nobody cares about wearing masks except for a couple people. And then one Black person in the history ever of this place that's been around for 25 some years moved here and came over to our house outside, social distance, to go, I got to get out of here. I can't. And I said, do you feel like you're in the movie Get Out? And he goes, oh, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, he hightailed it out of here in, 6 weeks, I think.
Completely understandable, right? Like, it's just,
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I was taking walks with people that, one of them that's a full-on, racist without apology, and the other one that believes that they're evolved and not that way. And that's even worse, in my opinion. And,
because they won't listen.
They won't listen. Nah. Yeah. And I mean, I was walking just to walk for the exercise, and so many things were going on that made me sick. And I finally got to the point where I couldn't even stomach going on walks anymore. And the one that is totally a racist and all about Trump and blah, 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 even said to me, sometimes I have to turn my brain off when we walk with this other person. And I thought, yeah, I got to do it with both of you. So I had to stop doing it because I couldn't, when someone is that ignorant, you can't, I mean, I tried, listen, I did my level best to do some education in different ways and whatever, and it did not stick. And it was so bad that it's like, where do you even start?
Well, here is my struggle about unity, because obviously I want unity. Like,
yeah.
Right? Who wouldn't? Unity would be fabulous. And yet I can't get to unity when there are people who are literally denying reality. I just, how?
I know. And where,
planet.
I know. And where do you stop? I mean, where do you say, okay, I don't want to be someone that gives up, keep beating the drum, keep putting the message out. Where do you stop with that? Because at some point it does take a toll. It can take a toll on your mental health. And there are things like boundaries and not being around people that are toxic to you. Maybe they're lovely to everybody else, but you're like, no. So, but then I don't want to stop being an activist. This has been an interesting time to try to figure out where your activism can stay on the mark and healthy for your growth,
Absolutely. So this is what I really want to know. When you're on these walks and you're listening to these people, did you start walking faster and faster and faster?
No, you know what happened? I mean, I started walking slower, and I developed something I've never had in my entire life, plantar fasciitis. And I told my husband, I said, you know what? I think I got that because my body was like, girl, if you ain't going to listen with your head, we're going to make you listen with your body. You need to stop this. 6 days a week, spending an hour and a half to 2 hours with these people is not healthy.
Yeah.
So we're going to take you out completely so that you can't do it.
Well, it's a good thing that our bodies do that for us.
Yeah.
We're not always able to appreciate it, but yeah.
I mean, my hat's off. I mean, to you, my hat's off to you. My hat's off to anyone that, goes to work or has an activity where you absolutely are going to bang your head against a wall with people who, especially the ones who believe that they are so not and are offended, mortally offended that you would even think that they have any racism as an example in them whatsoever. And you're like, did you hear what you just said? That's called white entitlement. I mean, how do you not see that? And they just won't.
No. And so I told you before, I end up having a lot of conversations with people about two things in general. One, intent versus impact. Like, we need to recognize the impact that the things that we say and do have on other people. And then sort of this, I don't know, somehow the sort of call out of like, I am going to do my level best to model what it's like to have an uncomfortable conversation. Because if you don't see it, okay, I can believe in your good intent, but then I need to have a conversation with you about it so that you have the opportunity to learn, which, as you can imagine, just
Doesn't always go over well.
no.
Yeah.
And I definitely have people who look at me like, who do you think you are? And I'm like, I'm a person who cares.
Yeah.
Right. So I'll leave the expletive out, but I made this T-shirt for myself and the two other women co-founded.
You don't have to leave the expletive out.
All right. So I'll tell you the actual T-shirt. So two other women and I founded this group in June in my town. It's called ABAR Suffield. ABAR stands for Anti-Bias, Anti-Racism Suffield. So we're doing all this stuff. We're going to all the town meetings. We've had some really nice progress and a lot of moments of banging our head against the wall. And as a result, I started even more using the phrase IFHP, which stands for, in case you can't figure it out, I fucking hate people. And I made each of us a T-shirt that says IFHP. And then be like, what does that mean? And I'm like, it's a personality type. What? And then one of my friends says, you can tell people it's, I found my happy place, which was even funnier. But I mention this because I obviously don't hate people, or that's the entire point, right? Is that I care. And that bang your head against the wall when you just know that there's a right thing, there's a right way. And it's not like I'm the arbiter of what's right. It's just like some things just are. Like, hello, as a human. And so it's one of the things for me that's come up this year that even more than in the past is both how much I care about humanity as a whole and individuals as well, and then how hard that is sometimes.
Yeah, it is really hard. And boy, there are some great lessons in that. Everybody, has their own lessons. For me, it's been about how offended do I need to be? Like, there are things to be offended about, like racism. Yep. Okay. And then there are ignorant people purposely doing and saying hurtful things, or not even purposely, or they're doing it purposely because that's who they are, but maybe it's not like they're just targeting you. It's just, that's their equal opportunity, hurtful people. And how much energy, and really I think about this, how much energy have we expended in 2020 just dealing with COVID, political unrest, social, all the stuff that's gone on. So I really had to think about, okay, you got to choose your battles. I can't be pissed off at everything all the time. I can't be aghast and offended at everything all the time, even though it felt like, I need to just look at pictures of bunnies because that's the only thing that doesn't offend me right now. And there better be black, brown, and white, but you know what I mean? White bunnies in the picture. You just get to that point where you're just like, I'm tired. My mental health is challenged. And so I decide, well, what can I do about that? Well, I can practice not being aghast. I can practice not being offended. I can practice if somebody says something horrific or just what? Like, the Joe Biden is a hologram and whatever QAnon stuff that I have had people legit tell me, and I can practice having no response.
Yeah.
And not having it follow me into my home for me to stew about later. Like, of course you want to be upset. Of course. But I had never practiced not. So I took it upon myself to try that. And it's been quite interesting.
I like it. That's a good idea.
I mean, some things you have to. Racism, yeah. Be aghast, be offended, be disgusted. But, if somebody wants to tell me that, our current president is actually dead and is a hologram and with a straight face and a shameful tone, an imperious tone, because they know that they're right about this. Whatever, dude. I don't have to I can just go, and walk away.
I hadn't heard that one. So, my original favorite was, I don't know, COVID is connected to 5G.
That's the wife. The wife of the guy that says that Biden is actually a hologram and that Trump is still president. And on March 6th, I think, or 3rd or 4th or whatever, he's actually going to appear as our actual president. All that stuff that they believe. I've heard all that from these people. And the wife is the 5G one that believes that COVID is linked to 5G. And
I'm sorry. I hear those things. I'm like, I just don't get it. I don't understand. I don't know I don't know how anyone came up with that. Then I try to step back and go, that is creative. Bizarre, but creative. How that your brain came up with that is pretty creative, because my brain would never, ever, ever go there.
Right. I would have to be kidnapped and put into a cult and programmed for years for those things to become my reality. And these people were not kidnapped. They were not forced into a cult. They just adopted these beliefs. And also as a person in the mental health field, I sat and thought, okay, so what does it say about me to make fun of or whatever? I have made fun of them a few times. I'm not going to lie, but to sit back and go, obviously this is a mental health struggle here. And where do I go? Where does my empathy go in those situations? So I'll say, just full disclosure, I have needed for my own mental health to make fun of, not to their faces, but in my circles, just to deal with it myself.
Yeah. That's what I said. There's a lot. And then, this is again, sort of back to something you mentioned in the beginning, but the change in our interpersonal habits since COVID, right? Because even for the people who were pretty introverted and tended to have fewer in-person interactions, this is still on a whole other level. And so that's this other lens that cuts through.
Totally.
I can't wait. I'm so looking forward to being in person with people who matter in my life.
Yeah. I know. And I did a show. We have a new podcaster on the network. He's amazing. I love what he's doing, because this is something that affects hundreds of thousands of people, but nobody really talks about it. It's called avoidant personality disorder. And he's doing a show called Avoiding Life. And he and I teased about this. We did his first show yesterday, and I said, how's the pandemic been for you? And he goes, well, joking but serious, maybe I'm the only group of people on the planet who said the pandemic has been wonderful for us because we want to avoid everybody anyway.
No, right. I have a number of people that I know and I'm close to who are pretty introverted and would generally prefer, to be on their own and home a lot of the time. So I've had these conversations with them because it started off, they're like, oh, this is great for me. This totally works. But
I said those things too. And now it's like, no,
it's not.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that really speaks to our human need for connection.
Yeah.
And and not just connection, like that we can do it virtually, that we can talk and Zoom and stuff like that is fabulous. But there's this other level of what it means to be in the presence of other humans.
Oh, yeah. I mean, thank God for my animals. I know you too, because I mean,
Yeah.
my dogs are, they are attached to one is attached to one leg and one is attached to the other. I don't know how I would have gotten through this whole time without. Oh, I mean, apparently I needed a lot of help because, a horse, a donkey, 4 dogs. I mean, that's a lot of animals, and I could not have gotten through this time without them.
We know. I have 3 dogs, 2 cats, 2 birds. So,
Exactly.
Whatever. Funny thing though, I was thinking about this the other day. So context, when this began, because I work a lot with first responders, police, firemen, veterans, and then other mental health professionals, with lots of trauma. In the beginning, I was still seeing people face to face because I have room in my office for physical distancing, and we could wear masks and I could ventilate and all of that. And I bought some huge HEPA filter that's like way too big for my office. So
you're like cleaning the entire office building. Yeah,
exactly. So it's like, wow. So I continued doing that, although, anyone who could go to remote went to remote, but it was also part of it. There are some people who really, because of the nature of what we were working on, it needed to be in person. So time passes. Now we're in this January. So we come up to almost a year, and I had a hip replacement, which went really well. It was fabulous. It was an anterior method. So I recovered really, really quickly. And as a result, though, I had to do everything sort of to prepare, because I'm like that, ahead of time. So I had an entire week where I didn't work at all, and I was home. And my office is only 15 minutes away. But for that whole week, I was home, not doing anything. And then the next 2 weeks, still home, but only doing things remote. And I'm like, I did COVID backwards. Like, how did that happen? Everybody else was home in the beginning and never left. And suddenly I'm home. Like, not that it's the end, but,
it's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So it's been really interesting to see for me sort of what that has meant. And having not been home, there was, I think I'm now experiencing what some people experience at the beginning, which is, oh, I can appreciate being home and
Right.
adapting to things. So it's just a sort of different lens on things. Not that I don't still go to my office, but just by the nature of what was going on, I actually needed to be home.
Yeah, I've found I'm moving as we're building a tiny home. I've always wanted one of those. We are actually having one built, and we're moving to some family property in the next several months, and
not soon enough.
Yeah. Even though nobody bothers me, which is fantastic. They used to all just try to push buttons, and now they're like, oh yeah, we need to just leave her alone. Like, and that was a process, a very good process for me to go through. But I realize, the reason why a tiny home appeals to me now is because I am not going to spend a lot of time in my house. I'm going to spend it out in nature.
Yeah.
I never appreciated nature, animals, just going to dinner at a restaurant. I miss that. That's not out in nature, but that is the thing I miss the most, is just going to a restaurant. I haven't been to a restaurant in, I don't even, almost a year. I haven't had a haircut that I haven't done myself in a year. I haven't done it, and I don't miss that stuff necessarily, but the things that I do miss, I'm going to a movie theater. I miss.
Oh.
So
that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just, it's interesting how our priorities shift, and we grow into, finding other things that we go, oh, why didn't I think of this before this pandemic? Because this is so healthy, this outlet, whatever it is, but you get where you get. from what you go through. But it's been quite fascinating to see things change. What used to be so important, what used to be the things that I did allow to traumatize me, not the stuff that just was traumatizing, because there's that, right, but the things I allowed to be traumatizing and then re-traumatized myself by going on and on and on about them. The ways that I have taken more and more responsibility for, okay, you don't need to, whatever.
Right. Let's stop that repeat. I want to really endorse what you said about nature. And so I took up in the summer, I think it was towards the end of the summer, I took up hiking with one of my very best friends. And so we were going hiking everywhere, which is fantastic. This is actually how I ended up needing the hip replacement, because it brought to light, I'd sort of ignored the osteoarthritis and other problems, successfully. But hiking, particularly going up, just wasn't that good. But that was literally the sort of closer and closer. So total truth, the closer we got to the election, the more I felt an absolute internal need to go hiking and be in nature, because it was the only time that I could stop my thoughts from thinking about what was going on or from obsessively checking the news and literally be present. I mean, obviously during my work, but, out of free time. So I don't want to make it sound like I didn't pay attention when I was working with people.
No, but you have this thing that is a distraction because you get into your work. Yeah, absolutely.
So literally, that was my healing space. And I started posting on my Instagram. Every time we'd go for a hike, I'd say to my friend, we need a selfie. She's like rolling her eyes like, really? I'm like, whatever. It's not about the selfie, because I want to look back on every single one of these and put myself back there. And then the pictures that I would take. So I would be walking along and I would literally talk about the details. I'd see some leaf that just had one drop of water on it. I'm like, oh, look at that. Right. And that's that same practice that I'm trying to teach people in therapy or when I'm speaking, is to say, right, that mindfulness and that nature are so healing. And we've got to do those things to balance what it means to also live in the real world.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. And how healthy it is to take breaks from things. I mean, I don't think that social media is inherently bad. I think can be good or bad depending on the person, doing it, right? For me, that was another thing. I went, okay, I'm going to really just not do that and see what that does, because I started to question, well, what's the intent behind, like, what's my intent? This is not a reflection on anybody else. Okay. This is just me. Who am I telling about my dog laying on my bed or whatever? Not that there's anything wrong with that, but like, why do I need to do that? I started questioning a lot of things in my life, not just social media, but that, and can I exist without sharing these things and what have you? And it's been really, I don't know, it's just been quite interesting. It reminds me a lot of how I coped as a teenager with so much trauma and stress going on that was just out of my control. How I coped then, it's interesting how I reverted back to a lot of those ways that I was, and realizing, oh my God, I was really doing healthy stuff as a teenager and I had no clue.
Good for you, right? How awesome is that?
And then I look at a friend of mine who plays a musical instrument in a foreign country, and they could care less about anything to do with social media, but they started filming themselves playing this instrument in nature, and their social media has just gone bananas over this, and how good that's been for them.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, how interesting. Because they would have never, I mean, they poo-pooed it, they put it down, they saw it as an ego thing. So for us to be doing the opposite thing at the same time and to talk about what that means to you and what that means to them. And it's just been really cool to go, God, we really all do have to figure out what works for us. And it really doesn't have anything to do with anybody else.
Right. And that's not just okay, but it's a good thing to be able to reflect and to figure out like what works for me and to take out, this is my theme, but take out the worry about judgment from others.
Yeah.
Right? So this idea of like, how do we truly care enough about ourselves to have it be our opinion that matters?
Yeah. And, I think about this too, where I'm moving is on a family property. And everybody's heard on my show about family dynamics, in my life. And I really think that living here in this place, I'll be forever grateful, even if I choke on saying the word grateful about this place, because I'm still in it. But I really, the inevitable passive aggressive comments, the inevitable stuff that families can do, because of my taking the time to go, do I really need to care about this person, what this person just said, is going to help me in being around family, having those things happen, and me going, I don't need to comment on that.
Right. Right. Look at this. Right. Growth through adversity, Kristin. Way to go.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm so glad you're doing what you're doing. I mean, I can't think of any, I legitimately cannot think of anybody in my life that should be doing what you're doing more. You're this like perfect crystallization of you going into what you're doing with, politics. And I just can't think of anybody better.
So I have to tell you, we just started this because it's somewhat funny. We just started a weekly series. It's open not just to our community, but it's open to anyone who happens to see it and wants to join us. Right. So we're happy to have people join us. So we're calling it overall Living ABAR Values. And so this month is the Black History Month series, but overall, the concept is Living ABAR Values. So we're going to be talking about, so of course, May is Mental Health Month. And so if you'd like, you could join me on the week that I'm doing this to talk about mental health and living ABAR values.
I would love to.
That'd love to. Awesome.
So, I mean, do you want to share with the listeners, how they would find this? And
if they go, I post about them on my, you can find it because it's public, page on Facebook, Kristina, Kristina, Hallett, Hallett. And I'll also share some links with you. So the one I'm doing next week, I forget the actual title, but it's something like Getting Comfortable Being Uncomfortable, Ways White People Can Learn and Still Take Action.
Yeah, because we do. It is. We do.
How many times does someone say, well, I'm learning. I'm like, yeah, well, you can take action too. You can do the both.
Right. And we have of course we picked this as a career and so on, but we're pretty comfortable being uncomfortable due to the nature of being in the field that we're in, but not everybody else is.
Exactly.
I'm real comfortable being uncomfortable, And
I get it. Part of the message I really want to get out there to people is this idea that you're not perfect. Nobody's perfect. No one will ever be perfect. Like perfection is just an unachievable goal. And so when we talk about learning about internalized or systemic racism or becoming more aware, or it could be we're looking at LGBTQ plus, whatever, autism, pick mental health, pick what it is.
Right.
That you're going to stumble.
Of course.
And that's okay, right? No, like this idea of, I got to wait until I've got it perfectly because I care. So I want to do it perfect because I don't want to screw it up. I'm like, you are going to trust me.
Oh, yeah.
No matter how deeply you care and how much you're learning to work to be a support and an ally, this stuff is part of how we've grown up. And it's ongoing work. It's not this destination. So you're going to stumble. So instead of holding back, like, oh, I'm not there yet, like, understand, continue to move forward, and then take ownership when you stumble and screw it up. Like, that's okay.
I know we can't erase who we've been. I did a show with my good friend Martha. We do a show called Empowered Empaths, and she had said on a show, "My God, I'm appalled at who I was years ago." Sometimes, and I thought, yeah, I am too. And I have 8 years of content of me at various stages of growth. And it's funny when I'll get a comment on a show that I did 8 years ago and where I was at that time, and the person's just heard it today. And it's triggered them in some angry way. And so they'll leave this horrendous comment. And I think, well, I'm not going to listen to that show again, because good Lord, it came out my mouth. Hopefully I've grown, whatever. But reading the comment, I'm like, well, the first thought as a couple of those, there's only been a few, but a couple of those came in. I was like, should I go take all those down? And then I thought, nah, whatever. Like you said, we're not, nobody's perfect. It's so easy to leave a shit comment on somebody's book, on somebody's speech, on somebody's acting, on somebody's podcast. It's so easy to just fire off something crappy. And I try to think now, and maybe this will make a few people that have known me in the past laugh at what a hypocrite I may sound like saying this, but I do now try to think, okay, my lobbing back some shite comment back to them, do I really want to cause that person who obviously does not feel good right then that they would write something like that? Do I want to add to it by saying something shitty to, like, what does that say about me? Can I just let it go? Mm-hmm. And, I think that's called growing up.
So I have to tell you my smoothie theory.
Okay.
This is my smoothie theory. It's connected to what you're saying. So how in the mental health world forever, we've been like, oh, it's just like peeling back an onion. There's layers and layers and layers. And
right.
Okay, it's not that that's untrue, but I've started thinking about that. I'm like, why is your goal the center of an onion? Like, why do you want that?
Onions make you cry.
Right.
They can smell bad. They can give you a stomach. They can cause ulcers. Yeah.
And in essence, what you're doing is saying, I'm trying to throw away or remove parts of myself, which to me seems anti-self-compassion and anti-self-acceptance. So highly questionable ultimate goal, center of an onion, and a process that isn't really caring of oneself, right? It's sort of saying, I got to peel it back and peel it back. So instead, here's my idea. We think of everything, who we are in this moment, we're a smoothie. And our smoothie includes everything we've gone through. But, in smoothies, we blend stuff together. So we're not getting rid of anything. We're saying, okay, that was a trauma experience or a difficult experience or hated that one. But we're not saying, and therefore I've got to throw it out or it's not okay. We're saying that it's part of what makes me who I am. So not only does the smoothie idea, rather than the onion, let us be integrated with everything we are, but we can take agency because we can take the action of altering our smoothie by adding in new ingredients. So we add in time in nature, or we add in mindfulness or meditation or eating well or whatever it is. We're altering our smoothie. Nothing has to be excluded. We're accepting ourselves for who we are and have the ability to impact who we are going forward.
Oh, I love that. I love that. That's fantastic. I never did like the peeling of the onion thing.
It's annoying. Someone else said, oh, think of it as petals on a rose. I'm like, still, your point is you're taking
discarding
things off.
Things. Yeah.
Right. But the reality is that to be okay with who we are, we have to be able to allow and accept all of our experience. It doesn't mean we're like, yeah, I want that again. But accepting ourselves means, okay, like A, B, and C occurred. Just like we've been talking about growth. So if you took down those sessions from 8 years ago, it's almost like saying, oh, no, like that's not me. And I'm like, no, you get to be you. As the person who grows and changes. Woo-hoo.
I know, because you know what? I mean, we've talked a lot about narcissism and narcissistic personality disorder and so on. Everybody has their level of narcissism. And, we don't have enough time even, and it's a whole other show to talk about what the difference is between when it becomes a personality disorder and when it's just regular, everyday narcissism. But what I look at it now, there's so much out there about they just can't change, they can't evolve. And that's not true. With the smoothie thought of it, that with that, I love that analogy, because they just tend to do it at the pace of a snail as opposed to someone that doesn't have a personality disorder. So even judging, then where do we get off judging somebody's ability to grow? Like, shouldn't they get some, all of the victims and survivors out there are going to go, no, don't say to feel sorry for them. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying, live with the reality that everybody grows in one way or another. Your fingernails keep growing. Your hair keeps growing. Your eyelash, you grow. It just might be a lot slower, almost naked to the human eye. And some other people, but everybody does grow. You can't help it.
Right. Exactly.
Oh, well, it's been months. I'm so glad we got to.
Right. Clearly
we needed it.
Clearly we need to do this more often because we just can't stop talking.
Exactly. So everyone, Dr. Kristina Hallett, she does the podcast Be Awesome, which is so great. You can find it on every possible podcast app you can think of. And Kristina, tell them where they can find out more about you online.
So you can go to drkristinahallett.com, and you've got to know this. Coming out literally Launch Party Friday, published Sunday, Valentine's Day, is my newest book. Super excited. It's called Millennials Guide to Relationships. Happy and healthy relationships are not a myth. And it is actually appropriate to people who are not millennials, because it's really like, hey, how do we manage relationships? It covers relationships with self, with roommates and friends, with romantic partners and parents.
Oh, how awesome. I love it.
I'm super psyched.
Yeah, I am too. Ooh, we'll have to do a show just about that.
Absolutely.
Well, listeners, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode with one of my favorite guests, obviously, Dr. Kristina Hallett on Mental Health News Radio. Hi, listeners. I'll make it quick. These are some really cool places that give discounts and other cool things for listeners of Mental Health News Radio Network. If you want to get amazing help with healing from narcissistic abuse, go to healfromanarcissist.com. If you want CBD products that are the best of the best, I use them myself, go to proze.com and use the code mentalhealth20, mentalhealth20. If you want to get daily perk ups that help retrain your brain to think more positively, go to perkupdaily.com. And also, just because this one's fun, snarkycandles.com. I guarantee you'll love them. Snarky with a Y, SNARKY candles.com. And don't forget, if you want to hear all the shows on the network about first responders, you can go to firstrespondernmentalhealthnetwork.com, and all of our shows that focus on narcissistic abuse, narcissisticabusehealingnetwork.com. Thanks for listening, and back to the show.
But will you ride the low, low, lows with me? Will you ride the low, low, lows with me?
One thing you can always count on at Mental Health News Radio Network and my show is that there will always be dogs around. Why? They are natural healers, excellent for your mental health. The original therapy dog Miles has something to say in just a moment. For now, please check out all of our amazing shows at mentalhealthnewsradionetwork.com and all your favorite podcast apps. Until next time, I'm Kristin Walker, and thank you for listening.
And I can ride the low, low, lows with me. I can ride the low, low, lows with me. Till my vision clears up perfectly. I can ride the low, low, lows with me.
Good boy.